and how people can get involved. So the first question is, what is the NGP? So the Neutron Grants Program is a grants program like many of you guys may be familiar with within Cosmos, with the aim of supporting businesses, applications, and public goods that add value to Neutron in some way or other. We've been live for about 1 year. We've kind of currently paused grant approvals, and they'll be opening kind of in the next few weeks with a few changes. But we've funded 36 grants altogether, some of whom are kind of in the room right now. Our treasury size in terms of like the amount of grants in theory we can give out is around 10 million, obviously varies each day with the Neutron price, but it's around there. And we've had around 115 total applications, which have ranged from applications, protocol research, education, and kind of a variety of other things. So that it's not necessarily just focused on product-facing things. We've also been quite willing to fund infrastructure or public goods or other things for that matter. So the purpose of the Neutron grants program, especially going forward, I would say is twofold. So last 2 days ago, I talked a lot about products and integrated applications, and that's a big part of what we want to fund. So funding back in leading businesses and apps, and the way we're looking about it going forward is that the NGP and the Neutron ecosystem can act as that initial bootstrapping funding to help you get off the ground. And we see this as the first part of a kind of more holistic package of how to support teams building on Neutron. So going forward, we'll probably give around up to 50K to individual teams and grantees looking to build interesting products on Neutron, and that is one track. And on the other hand, we still support public goods and things that aren't necessarily as obviously commercialized. I'll give a few examples down the road, but in the past we've sponsored things such as open source indexes, protocol upgrades, so kind of grantees and teams that have actually like implemented changes to the Neutron blockchain itself, and those things aren't as obviously commercial and kind of don't necessarily have a profit motive, but are still obviously very valuable, and we support that as well. So on the application side of things, and the product side of things, there are probably 3 tracks. I mean, the third track is obviously very ambiguous, but 3 things we kind of especially look to fund. So I've talked a lot about DeFi. Neutron's niche is not the only thing we do, but the thesis is that integrated applications and integrated finances are where we think Neutron can really be strong. So a lot of our key applications and products right now, such as Drop, Mars, Astroport, are in the DeFi space, and we have a bias, I would say, to things within DeFi, things that either exist around finance or kind of do something cool in finance, and then also things that are able to build on the existing infrastructure we have. Because I think one thing we're really thinking about is, hey, how do we as a chain and an ecosystem differentiate ourselves from the hundreds of other smart contract chains in the space? And we think we do that via our integrated application thesis. So we're really looking to help support teams that are also interested in that. Whether that's, hey, we're going to build a vault or a wrapper or some other interesting financial primitive on Neutron's DEX, or find something cool to do with the Slinky Oracle or some of the other integrated features we have coming out in the couple of next months. But then at the same time, we're still open to something different. Like, I'm not kind of presumptuous enough to think I know what the best things in crypto are or the most interesting products in crypto are. There's a lot of things that we haven't even thought about, these unknowns and knowns. And if there's something interesting from an interesting team, we're always happy to support them via grants and also general ecosystem support. And on the other side of things, so especially looking historically on the public goods side of things, we've supported a lot of things around education. So helping onboard developers, teaching developers about CosmWasm, about how to develop smart contracts on Neutron. This has been to the benefit of Neutron, but also to other ecosystems within Cosmos as well. We're always keen to support infrastructure, whether that be things, previous grants we've supported include DAO. So we've worked quite closely with DAO. DAO powers a lot of Neutron's governance. We've supported them and kind of other protocols in the same way. And then also protocol research. So we've funded applicants and kind of teams that are building things that actually improve the Neutron blockchain itself. For example, we worked quite closely with Range Security quite recently to implement a new version of the IBC rate limit module, which has just gone live on Neutron a few weeks ago. Yeah, and then one other interesting thing we have, so we found a lot of interesting examples of really smart people within Cosmos. Maybe they were kind of like previously in the Terra ecosystem, and obviously we know how that went, or kind of other things along those lines, who don't necessarily fit into one of the previous categories. Maybe they don't have an exact business or idea they want to build, nor do they have some kind of public good they're already working on, but they're already still really cool, high-value people we want to stay involved in the Neutron ecosystem. So one thing we came up with was the Neutron Innovators Program, which essentially you can think of as kind of like a monthly stipend to allow someone to have the free range to build whatever they want on Neutron. And we kind of try to work with these Neutron innovators to define generally what kind of things they're interested in to build. So for example, a previous NIP grantee was this guy called Deploydon, who maybe some of you guys have seen on Twitter. He built a lot of fun, interesting games like a meme launchpad and some other things on Neutron. We never kind of prescriptively told him he needed to build one specific thing or gave a grant linked to one specific thing, but gave him the freedom to build whatever he wanted. And that kind of worked quite nicely, I think, for him. And he's actually gone on to join the Neutron team, but there are other NIP grantees as well who work on various things that they find interesting and fun, and perhaps they turn into proper products or proper research proposals and other things like that, but also it's fine if they don't. And I think it's important to help spur innovation and experimentation on Neutron specifically. Yeah, so I kind of talked about this a bit, but kind of generally the things that we find the most important when it comes to funding via grants are things that fit into our general vision of integrated applications in finance. Maybe, like I don't think this is the only way to build a blockchain, nor am I saying that this is necessarily the best way. We think it is, but we generally think that the grantees have the best success building on Neutron and getting support from the NGP if they're generally aligned with our thesis around integrated applications. And then secondly, one thing we're really focusing on kind of going forward is we want to work with grantees and teams that realistically see themselves focusing on Neutron way into the future. So obviously I understand there's some people that kind of work a lot on different projects and different blockchains, but the grantees that stand the best chance of really getting the most support from Neutron and the NGP would be those who are generally aligned, kind of like us, and obviously we'll like you too, and we work closely for the foreseeable future together. And then finally, and I'll say this is the biggest thing, like as in, especially me as a person reviewing grants, I'm not necessarily very obsessed with, hey, you had to present them in a certain way or give a very beautiful looking slide deck or anything like that. Those things are less important. Kind of people have successfully got grants where they've just written a Word doc which have laid out things very clearly. I think the most important thing is just to understand, hey, what are you really trying to build? Identifying the exact problem within Neutron. Hey, maybe it's, hey, Neutron has really bad open source indexes and you kind of want to come on and fix it. This is what the Spacebox index team did over there. It could be, hey, Neutron needs more infrastructure around DEXs or needs better documentation. That could be a thing. But as long as there's an actual problem that you guys are trying to solve, we're open to giving you guys funding and helping you support in some other way. Yeah, so I'll briefly go over a few case studies of successful grantees. We have 36 grantees who've successfully received funding, so this does not cover all of them by any stretch of imagination. But yeah, I'll touch on a few to potentially kind of give you a grasp of some of the things we are generally happy to fund. So kind of, yeah, so Deploydon, who's one of our Neutron innovators, kind of launched a meme coin launchpad. This is one of the various things he launched. We're generally happy to fund these things. I think it was an example of something that potentially wasn't seen as a super long-term project, but more of an experiment, but it kind of gave us a lot of interesting ideas as to what kind of things in finance and DeFi generally work. So the Bro and Bros team kind of produced an open source Neutron indexer, which indexes kind of all the modules on Neutron, including the DEX. And this was obviously something we funded quite a while back, I think basically at the end of last year, and has added a lot of value to people trying to build other applications on Neutron. And we funded things such as I mentioned before, the IBC rate limit module on Neutron. So we're open to funding things such as indexes to protocol, things that actually improve the Neutron protocol specifically to applications in general. And the same thing with, especially going forward, as I said before, we're doubling down on things to do with DeFi and integrated applications, and we've funded a number of applications such as EclipseFi's Equinox vaults, which are built on top of Astroport, and then also market-making vaults. So these are vaults that market make on top of the Neutron DEX, and some of these have just launched recently. And also, another interesting thing we've funded is prediction markets. So kind of the Velo team, we funded them kind of towards near the start of this year, and they're building kind of fun prediction markets, which, like quite recently, Neutron our Twitter actually got hacked, and they kind of funded a prediction market over when we would get our Twitter back, which we have as of today. So if any of you guys betted on that, then maybe you'll have made like $1 or $2. Yeah, so I'll touch on the application process. So the application process, we've tried to make it as simple as possible. So someone can go to neutrongrants.com, and there's a button in the top right-hand corner which says apply. And then there's a simple type form application where you just run through the various details of your application. These things, I think, will be quite familiar to anyone that's applied for a grant that before. And the general aim with this is just to try to give a person, a grantee, the best opportunity they can to explain what they're trying to fund, just like, what they're trying to build. So information about the team, information about the product, the timelines, the kind of milestone breakdown, and also the financials. After that, every single applicant that kind of goes past the initial screening typically gets 2 to 3 interviews. So I'm the grants lead at the NGP. There's also 3 other reviewers who work in other positions within Cosmos. So typically, either me or one of the other reviewers would review the application initially and then conduct 1 or 2 interviews. Depending on how much funding someone's asking for, that may determine whether we need, 1 or 2 interviews or 2 to 3 interviews, and then further technical review from the Neutron team or from other partners we have. And then following that, so assuming that someone gets accepted and we're like, hey, we want to fund these guys for X amount of money. One cool thing about Neutron and the NGP compared to other programs is we have a public accountability mechanism. So the NGP, the internal team, can say, hey, we really want to fund this new DeFi application, but all proposals to fund from the Neutron, the NGP's treasury, have to go through a 3-day veto period through which the main DAO, so anyone that stakes Neutron, can actually veto kind of a grant payment. So this is just a way to hold us accountable. We haven't, fortunately, been vetoed about any of our grant payments yet, but it does mean that we have to kind of hold ourselves to quite a high standard of accountability and transparency compared to some other grants programs, which generally don't or aren't very transparent, unfortunately. Yeah, so I've explained some tips I would generally give people about kind of applications to the NGP, and I can talk about these a bit more if anyone has questions, or just pull me over over the course of this week. But one thing I'll say is, like, it's really important to properly lay out exactly what you're trying to build and kind of what your strategy is. I know this can maybe sound a bit simple, but I think especially for someone that's been maybe working on something they really find interesting or unique or cool, I think it's quite easy to get stuck in the weeds sometimes, and especially given that all of the people in the NGP come from different backgrounds, I think it's generally quite helpful to explain as simply as possible what the plan is, what the product is, whether this be like a public good or whether this be an application, what you're trying to build and how you plan to build it. We find some information about the finances very helpful, so kind of generally a plan or a layout or breakdown of how you've come to the initial grant ask you've had. Because often there's a bit of a back and forth about deciding what the final grant ask will be. And the more information we have, for example, hey, are there certain infrastructure costs that you have to pay up front? Are there certain kind of salaries and compensation that you would require to kind of continue the work on? As much kind of breakdown and information about that is also helpful for us to be able to justify given a certain grant. Because obviously, as I mentioned before, this goes to the community, and the community can ultimately decide to veto a given grant or not. And then finally, so obviously, especially given that grants can be about anything, and we obviously don't necessarily have a lot of information aside from the information that you've given us, it's helpful to kind of give as much information you can about your past experiences, what are the things you've done in crypto, in Cosmos, or outside of Cosmos to help justify why you and your team are able to build what you say you want to build. Yeah, and then one thing I will say, so we are especially working very hard to not just only support teams via the NGP. So I mentioned before, I'm the head of the NGP, but also the head of ecosystem. And especially going forward, Neutron sees our kind of key unique selling point is that we really want to support grantees and other people that want to build a Neutron, and more than just, hey, let's give you some upfront funding and then never talk to you again. So NGP and grants is an option. And we also offer go-to-market help, audit support, marketing, introduction to further funding sources, and more. And we have a few projects that have launched quite recently, including Drop, which is a liquid staking protocol incubated inside of Neutron, but now exists as a third-party protocol, which have kind of gone through our ecosystem playbook and had some success there. So we hope over the next year we can have a lot of different projects that maybe start as a hackathon team or team via an introduction that may receive initial grant funding, but there's a playbook we have now which can take you from initial MVP to ecosystem support to launch planning to then finding further support, whether that be venture funding or kind of other sources, which we can provide you, especially via our connections, to eventually launch it on Neutron. And we see our package as like a holistic package as opposed to, hey, we're going to give you a grant and then never talk to you again, which I don't think better serves kind of anyone kind of in trying to do something. Yeah, so yeah, that's that. I kind of rambled on a bit too much, but yeah, this is the NGP. Anyone has any further questions, feel free to ask. You can scan this to get to the Neutron grants page. So kind of anyone that's interested in applying for a grant, just scan the QR code. Hopefully this works. And also you can make sure to follow us on Twitter at Neutron Grants. So yeah, thanks guys. Yeah, I think we have a few more minutes. If there are any questions, yeah, feel free. None? Go.
So thank you for this presentation. You introduced the Neutron Grants program, which seems like you can apply for anything you want. Do you also have directed grants that, ask people for specific stuff that you guys need?
Yes. So as I mentioned before, we're kind of in an awkward stage right now because we're kind of like renewing the grant program for the next year. But kind of when the next year the grant program starts, we'll come up with specific kind of RFPs, like as in kind of like requests for products and things we want to see. And that probably will exist first in the form of, hey, we want this product or this application, and also we need help with these public goods and those things. So yeah, I would say probably at the start of next year, we'll kind of be a lot more proactive and kind of prescriptive in terms of what we also want to see, but we also are very willing to accept people surprising us with interesting stuff. I would say out of the grants we had last year, maybe kind of half of them, like half to 2/3 of them in some form were a response to some prescriptive kind of information we gave about what kind of things we want to see on Neutron. And then 1/3 were things that just surprised us or were kind of like more proactive application from the grantee side. Yeah. Cool. Thanks, guys.
All right.